Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we are talking about Dune 2021. It's out in theaters and on HBO Max at the time of this recording. So we are going to be getting into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out through any of those ways and then come back and watch our show. But let's go ahead and just jump right into this. And let me start by saying that I just said this to her on our Twitch channel that I would not have watched this movie if we weren't trying to have something to talk about for our show. And that being said, I was very surprised watching this movie with how much I ended up liking it. And the director of this film, I always have trouble saying his name, Delniv. Um, he has done two other movies that I have liked, but in different ways. He's done Arrival, which I think is a great movie, and he's done Blade Runner 2049, which I think is one of the most underrated sci-fi movies I've ever seen in my life. So knowing that he did this movie, I at least was intrigued. But since I have no knowledge on the first Dune movie and I didn't read the books, I didn't know what to expect. And it sounds like it was similar for you.
Yeah, all I know is that a lot of people were excited about it. But yeah, again, like we only watched it because of this show, because it was coming out. So we're like, yep. I mean, it's something that seemed like it would be popular. I think that if people read the book, that they would be really interested in watching the movie. Um, I mean, honestly, after you just gave me a little bit of background on the director, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, I can see how the this is very much in the style of that director. I my first question though when I started watching it, I was like, did Snyder make this? What's going? It's a very slow. Uh, but I do gotta say, that I knew it wasn't Snyder because
No,
it
slow
just
mo.
did. There was slow mo though. That's what
Oh,
made
there
me go.
was?
Yeah, there was a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of it. So I was like, okay, no, this can't be Snyder. But I did actually think that it was really pretty. I think the cinematography is beautiful. It looks so good. Like it's consistent throughout the whole movie. It looks so good. I really do feel like I'm watching like a it's just such a good in general, like sci-fi. It's so sci-fi. The world building is good. It's just like everything about the production design, the costumes, just it's very Star Wars esque. There's a little bit of Blade Runner I saw in there, and there's just I don't know. I felt a little Mandalorian in there, and I felt some like OG Star Wars in there. So I liked it. I liked that it was still its own, but it felt like other stuff. And so it
Right.
just kind of like all came together, and like I would definitely put this down in sci-fi cinematic history because of how good it looks.
I 100% agree. And when I was watching this, the comparisons that I came across were I'm getting feelings of Star Wars, I'm getting feelings of Game of Thrones, and I'm getting feelings of like space Lord of the Rings. And I was very impressed with the visuals. This is the only movie that we have watched in since we've started this show that I literally thought to myself, this movie is made to be seen in a theater. Ex- like explicitly this film. Like I did not go to see this movie in a theater, and I don't think you did either. I think we both watched it on HBO Max. But the scale of this film is incredible. It's not just the colors, which are like beautiful and how it's shot, but there are wide, huge shots where you see little people against a backdrop of like a huge ship, and they do that all the time. They have this way of establishing scale with their characters and the framing of their film, and it's like wow. Watching this on a smaller screen does not do this justice, and I can imagine how much better this would look on a theater screen. So I'm happy I was able to see it and still be safe where I saw it, but I can admit that this is a film that benefits from watching in a movie theater.
Definitely. It definitely does seem like it was built that way. It's crisp, it's rich, it's really well um, composited. It's just everything about it is meant to be pleasing visually. Now that's aside from story, and it's aside from editing because I did feel it was long, and everyone take a shot, establishing shots, a little bit overboard for me. Uh,
Oh, I thought we were gonna have to take a shot because it started with voiceover.
that too. I was gonna bring that up later, but mind you, we when I didn't bring it up when we were talking about Squid Game, but and I almost felt like the two movies that are like the two things that we decided to talk about today felt very similar in some ways. And I actually felt almost exactly the same way about both of them, which is like there's some things I like about it, and there's some things I don't like about it. It didn't get me at the beginning. The first hour was completely boring to me. And I was like, I'm so glad that I didn't go to the movie theater to watch it. But then later on, like after the first hour, I was like, okay, it's starting to get interesting. Um, I don't know if it really needed to be 3 hours long, because there's a lot of information in there. I understand that it's from a book, so there's a lot of information to give. I'm not a huge fan of how all the information is given because a little bit is expositional, but I also feel like there's a lot of stuff that they have to get through. There's a lot of world building. I almost feel as though it would have been better off as a television show. I don't think like that would be good for like how good of quality the visuals is, but in terms of story, I feel like it would probably be better as a television show. Mind you, again, it's a book, and it's not just a book, it's a series of books. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of stuff to get through. Um, adaptation is a very difficult thing to do.
Agreed. I think I do still appreciate it as a movie only because of the fact that it gave me feelings that I got from watching Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. It felt like an epic. It felt like an adventure, and it felt like a sweeping story that I was going to be able to enjoy for the next couple of years. That also felt unique. It's a sci-fi fantasy, and that's what Star Wars is. Star Wars is a sci-fi fantasy, and like I liked the idea that I'm going to be seeing more of this world, more of this adventure to see how these characters progress. Apparently, in the original movie, there was only one movie, and it was, I guess, a little shorter than this one, maybe the same length, but a little shorter, I think. Um, and people felt like it didn't cover nearly as much information that is covered in the books. And I don't know how many movies they plan on making for this series. I feel like it's two, but it might be three. Regardless, um, maybe it's the nostalgic feeling in me, but I liked having that feeling like I was a part of the start of something that was going to be progressing over the next couple of years, and I was getting back to that experience that I had when I was watching Lord of the Rings and seeing that journey with the first steps that Frodo took going towards Mordor. That's what it felt like seeing the character of Paul and meeting these characters and seeing you actually see him learning how to fight, and they establish that he's been trained and he's learning how to be better, and the movie caps off with him basically using that training to not only survive but to technically kill a part of himself so that he can become a completely new person and embark on this journey with this new group of people. When the movie ends, it almost felt like a Lord of the Rings ending of, yeah, we our characters have reached these different points. This character has reached here, and now the next movie is going to be about what the experience with these people is going to do for our main character.
Yeah, so my problem with that is that it didn't feel very unique to me in terms of story. I do think that it does have that like cool element of sci-fi where there's these like really cool like weapons and technologies and stuff like that. Um, but it did feel a little bit Avatar to me. It felt a little Dances with Wolves, Last
Dances with
Samurai kind of
Wolves.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah, it just, like this guy coming into this indigenous, ending up, stranded with this, indigenous group and them teaching him how to be a better person. Then he becomes the hero of that
I
group to
see.
like lead that
That's
group. And
fair.
I'm like, okay, another one of these. So I didn't really appreciate that. I used that pale word there, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. I'm not sure how it's gonna go, so I don't know if I approve of it or not, or if I think it'll be okay or not. But so far, it's kind of leaning towards I'm not okay with this.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have to wait and see. At least in the frame of casting choices, this movie is diverse all over the board, which is really nice. And it also has another thing that I know you love, which is that it has female characters that actually have agency. It has strong female characters within it, and it has his mom, who is almost basically like a co lead in this movie. Um, and it's cool. I like the fact that we get to see this main character with his mom and his dad. I feel like too many movies pick one or the other, but I like the fact that we get to see how his mom and his dad both influence him to become the person that he ends up becoming. There's a lot of side characters in this movie that I find myself enjoying too. But I agree as far as like I don't think I was as interested in the main character in as I was in the people around him and the world around him. And in some ways, I think that's okay. One of my favorite franchises is The Matrix, and Neo isn't terribly interesting, but the world that he occupies is. And I think that's what kind of really got me invested. It was that the fact that this world, while I can pull references to things that it reminds me of, it still felt like it was its own identity, and because of that, like I wanted to discover more about how this hierarchy and how this world actually works. um, but I definitely agree that the pacing in certain areas was like could feel very slow. And that is something that this director is known for. If you watch Blade Runner 2049, I think one of the biggest reasons that movie wasn't as successful as it could have been is because of how slow and methodical it is and how the pacing of that film works. And I understand why it's there, but I can also understand how that can not be for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It definitely was slow, but you're right. It does have its own identity. I really do enjoy. Like, I don't want to take away from that because I do think there's a lot of cool stuff going on there, like the idea behind the technologies and the stuff that they have, and just like the stuff that's going on. It's very interesting. It just took a while for me to get there, and I think that's one of the problems I had initially is that there's a lot of jargon. There's a
Yeah, there
lot
is.
of like words and things that are like I don't know, like you have to like kind of pay attention more and like watch more to like really learn the lore. And I think that's why it has its own identity. But in terms of like the basic storyline, that's the part for me that kind of doesn't really work. But again, I think because there's gonna be more. We know there's gonna be another movie, or there's supposed to be another movie.
See what actually
um,
happens.
yeah, like I'm interested enough to want to know what's going to happen, but I'm not like I can't wait. It's not like after I watched the second Pirates movie where I'm like, oh my god, I need to see the third one. I need to know what's gonna happen. It didn't cliffhanger me. They bookended it pretty well.
I agree.
But yeah, so it's kind of like I can't. It is a little bit more like the Star Wars series where it's bookended. So we can take a break and get ready to start a new chapter of the journey.
Yeah, I think that's really true. The fact that it feels like it bookended it really helps this movie not feel like you just can't wait for the next one. But I also think that is I might be not thinking about all the movies here, but I feel like that's part of the course for first movies in a series. Like I don't remember watching the first Lord of the Rings and thinking to myself, I can't wait for the Two Towers. Or like same thing when I watched the first Harry Potter film or the first Matrix movie or the first Pirates movie. I can't remember thinking to myself, I can't wait for the sequel. But a lot of times I feel like when you see that second movie though, that second movie usually makes you want to see the third.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll have to wait and see if that is how this movie goes. I don't know if they're I don't know how many movies they're going to make or they're planning on making. But if it is going to be a trilogy, then it'll be interesting to see if the second movie leaves more of that feeling of, oh, we didn't really bookend this. This is a honest to goodness to be continued, and you gotta watch the next one to be able to really enjoy it. So, or you just won't be able to wait for the next one. Um, but the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm sure this is down in your notes somewhere, but your boy did the score.
I know. Yes, I did. I did write that down. It did not go unnoticed. I really enjoyed the score. I don't know if it was the best score. No, it wasn't the best score. But we all know which one is the best score.
Oh God,
We already
bias.
covered that in a different episode. Um, but yes, I think that it was a wise decision for them to recruit Hans Zimmer for the score. I think it completely added character to the
It
movie.
elevates. It
Um,
elevates the movie.
yeah, and should they have gotten, I don't know, the same person that they got for like any of the Avengers movies, I think that this would have been completely different. It would not have been anywhere near as successful as it was. Um,
I mean, you're right though. We talk about it all the time. Music is not an afterthought. Sound design is not an afterthought. It absolutely can make or break your movie. And the score that Hans Zimmer created for this film elevates moments within the film. When you're sweeping around those sand dunes and you're seeing that trailer sink before the worm comes up, or even when they're running and the worm is chasing them, and even when they're just staring at it, like these scenes are elevated by the music behind them. And if the music that is in the movie was replaced with something else, I don't know that the movie would feel as good when you're watching it, because that's the whole thing, right? It is feeling. So it is what you're seeing, but it's also what you're feeling. And the music can evoke the feelings that I think the movie wants you to be feeling or thinking about when you're looking at these scenes.
like when you're feeling things.
Yes. Feelings, yes.
But yeah, I honestly I think that I mean Hans Zimmer is an incredible composer, but I think that he's actually very fitting because he does like to do some synth, which I think is perfect for sci-fi. But he also dabbles with other styles of music as well. So I felt like it was very him. It was very much his style. But I think it had like a good mix of, I guess I want to say like cultural type music mixed with futuristic sounds. So I think, it was, again, like he was just like the perfect natural choice for this movie.
Yeah. And I thought he was retired. Like, wasn't he retired, or did I hear that wrong? Did he
An
not
artist
actually
never
retire?
retires.
Okay, because yeah, that confused me. Um, but yeah, and we talked about how this is sci-fi fantasy, and it feels like hardcore sci-fi fantasy. There's there's technology and stuff like that, but then there's also weird mutant people, and there's powers where you can use your voice to control like what other people can do and things like that. So this movie, and especially not knowing anything about it going in, it just really caught me off guard. And I appreciate that like the book that exists out there was written in a way that feels like it might have been a little bit beyond like before its time. If this is the stuff, if this is the content that's in the book, that's great because normally we feel like I feel like we see, especially in movies, we see either hard fantasy like Lord of the Rings or hard sci-fi like Blade Runner. But this is it feels like a nice mixture and outside of Star Wars, I can't really think of that many pure sci-fi fantasy movies that exist out there. And so it's an untapped genre that I would love to see more of that and I think that's partially why I was connecting with the movie even during the slow parts because of the fact that it was filling a gap I didn't realize that I had in my desires that was only up until this point really satiated by the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that I think, adds to that, like what makes it so compelling. And I guess like what you're saying, it just seems like there's a lot of different layers. Like it's not one kind of thing. It's a mix of different kind of things that like work together. They fit together. There's nothing like out of place, I guess, and there's room for it to be like, okay, well that's a weird thing that's happening, but that's just how the world is, and they're explaining that to us.
Right.
Like
Exactly. You see weird
how
things you accepted.
yeah, like the Baron can float, and like why can he float? How are they related? How is he related to the main character's dad, Paul's dad? Um,
Right.
and then I mean, but then it kind of plays on the story because he lives because he can float. So,
Yep.
which is weird, and I don't get it. But I mean, it's a sci-fi movie, so and people are not like human, so that's how it works. And then there's like other cool things where they have that like cool shield thing where they just put this thing on their hand, and then it's basically I thought it was for combat training, but then they also use it in actual combat, so I thought that was interesting. It's kind of like the lightsaber of Dune.
It's right to that world. You're right.
Yeah.
And you brought up the combat training. What did you think about the action scenes that happened in the movie, like the fight scenes, the fight
I like
choreography?
them. I think it was good. It felt natural. It wasn't like like it wasn't interesting in the sense that I like they weren't really playing with the surroundings as much as other movies sometimes. But but it had its own style. It was kind of rustic, I guess you could say, where it wasn't like the combat wasn't very skillful except for when Jason Momoa was fighting. But it just felt like that's how people will talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or sorry, not how people will talk, but how people will like fight in real life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, it didn't feel so flashy, but it felt realistic. And I overall I liked that, and I liked that element of it, and I liked that the fight at the end wasn't so blown out. It wasn't like an a big epic fight. I mean, it's the last fight of the movie before the movie goes to credits, but it felt it felt very natural for the world, and I think that I like that. Um, this movie is also clearly planting things with like the future sight and seeing these things that I guess we'll see in future movies, which I think is cool and interesting. Um, so yeah, and then the next thing that I wanted to ask you about is that I mean we said we're going into spoilers, so here we are, but a lot of people catch it in this movie. A lot of people die.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Like
surprised. I was surprised that so many people died in a first movie. Like
first movie.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised until I started to realize that there would be another movie. When I started to realize that there was going to be more, because it had been an awful long time, and I was looking at the timer. I was like, it's going to end soon. Um, but there's still a lot of stuff to conclude. And then I was like, okay, a lot of people are dead. Like the dad's dead. What's his name? Jason Momoa's character died.
Yeah.
The basically the coolest character.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Even the woman, that scientist woman who I guess was like kind of neutral but was living with the people on Araxis, the
Yeah.
Fremen, like she got killed out of nowhere. She was like she called the worm and she was standing there and I was like, oh, what's she about to do? And then she just gets stabbed through the chest. I was like, whoa, whoa! I want to see what she looked like. She was about to do something cool. What the heck? Like, yeah, like people just get taken out of this movie like that.
It was like the
Which is
end
very
of
surprising.
Ragnarok.
You know what?
It was like the end of Ragnarok.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I was definitely caught off guard. It's definitely felt at some point like because even the guy that Paul fights at the end of the movie, I swore that was the guy that was in Paul's vision, where the guy was saying, "Hey, I'm going like stay with me and I'll train you how to fight." I could have swore that was the same guy in his vision, and then he kills him in that fight. So I was like, okay, now I just don't. So this movie, as much as I like it, I think it can be confusing at times. I think there's a lot of confusing elements, and there's a part of the movie where I wasn't entirely sure why the Emperor was trying to get this particular family killed. And I think I understood why the uncle was sore because they have this whole Game of Thrones houses type thing. So I could understand like that power struggle, and he wanted the spice so that he can control the galaxy and he can control the money. But I didn't understand why the Emperor, the unseen Emperor in this movie, wanted the family of Atreides to be eliminated. That's the one thing I didn't really understand.
Yeah, so I found it helpful to watch the first hour of the movie again, even though it was the most
And it was
boring.
the hardest part of the movie for you to watch.
Yeah, because that's where you get all the information. So even if you pay really, really close attention, the first time you watch it, it's still like there's a lot of stuff. It's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of jargon. But I do remember the lady that's like head of the I don't even know what they're called.
It's like these witches or spellcasters or
Yeah,
something.
when she's doing the test on Paul, she asks about the visions and whether or not they always happen. Like, do they all like they're futuristic visions, but do they always happen as you see it? And I
Yeah.
don't think he answers, but then I think that kind of hints towards like, yes, he's seeing visions and stuff, but it doesn't mean that they're all gonna come to pass. So I think that last scene where like we see the guy, because we see two people kill him in the visions, and that can't be true. So that just tells me that all these visions are possible futures.
That's really interesting that the movie delves into that and like it shows you things that don't happen. That's a very that's a very unique choice for lack of a better word because
Mm-hmm.
we're so used to the things that we're seeing being things that are going to matter or mean something in some way. And I guess that's not to say that they won't mean anything in the long run, but if you show us something that doesn't happen, then like why are we seeing it unless it's like something where I died and then I came back to life, or because I would have died and then because I did something different now I lived. I can understand that that's changing the future, but showing someone that is alive in your future but then dies in your present, that feels very odd to me. So it's interesting.
Yeah, food for thought. More complicated stuff. Um, and there's something else that you mentioned that made me think of something else that they kind of explained later or at the beginning of the movie, in the first hour. So I would definitely recommend just watching that first hour again because I think it might answer some questions that you had. If you didn't read the book. I think if you read the book, then it would all make sense to you and you're fine. But as people who have not had any Dune history before, I would definitely rewatch the first hour again.
Okay. I'll do that because like there was a couple of questions that I felt like I didn't really get answered,
Yeah. And it's more
even though I
interesting the
enjoyed it.
second time.
Okay, yeah, and I feel like that there's a lot of politics in the beginning of that first hour. So they're setting up like the conflict between the families and things. So yeah, and they're building the world like you said. And Game of Thrones, for all of its strengths, is a lot of just people talking. So
And that
that's
was interesting until the end. But
different
that's
different
another
conversation.
episode.
So yeah, so I'll go back and check that out. But I think because I think that's a good point.
The last thing I kind of wanted to just touch on is I thought that the way they ended it was cool because the last line that was said is "This is only the beginning," which I thought was cool because we already know that there's going to be another movie. Don't know how many, but then it did really make the whole movie with that ending line really made me feel like the what I had just watched was really just kind of a prelogue to
Oh, like a
what's to
prologue.
come. Yeah, sorry, prologue.
I mean, I get it.
it's like episode 1 of Star Wars kind of is how
Yeah,
I felt like. I was confused at the beginning because I was like, who is this voiceover? It's a female. Sound like a female. But we see a lot of faces, so I didn't know who was talking. And
I think her name
then,
is Chandi, but it's Zendaya's character.
I figured that out after I watched it the second time. It was like, oh,
Okay.
okay. Because then it, after like she gives us that whole like history of these people that I don't know who they are, which is why it was confusing. The first person that we see is Paul. So I was like, was that Paul when Paul was younger and now he's grown up?
I
and
see.
I thought it was a female because little boys kind of sound like little girls. So I don't know. Not that she's a little girl, but I was confused.
Yeah.
Again, voiceovers do not work for me. They bookended these voiceovers at least, so I think if you're gonna voiceover, do it right. And they did a basic voiceover, which I thought was okay. Like sometimes it's just necessary because you need that information faster. But it also was backed by some cool visuals, so I don't know. I didn't. I'm not a huge fan, but I didn't completely hate it.
No, I hear you. And the fact is that character is only in the movie for maybe 5 minutes total screen time.
Yeah,
Like she's not there that much, so we
yeah.
don't really know what her significance is going to be in the long run yet. And I think that's when I start to really understand that this is definitely our first movie because
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing so much about this character like in bits and pieces and in visions, and then we don't meet that character until the end of the movie. And even at the end of the movie, they don't have that much interaction. So there's I think they were saying that they're going to make that character have more to do in the next movie, but at least for this movie, it's like she's barely in there.
Yeah,
So
I was like, she's only in visions. I was like, she doesn't even have any lines. So that was before the voiceover I figured out.
oh
Um,
yeah, and until the end of the movie where she has lines at the
yeah,
very end, but
yeah,
yeah. So I guess I'll be interested to see what they do with her. Like you said, this is just the first movie, so seeing what they'll do with her character and how that character will impact the story or even Paul himself, um, that will probably dictate where you land as far as what the overall story of this movie is. Um, the one thing that I can say as a personal anecdote, a personal preference, regardless of how other people feel, is that for me, I'm just happy that unlike in fantasy worlds like Lord of the Rings, at least in sci-fi fantasy worlds, people that look like me exist. So I appreciate that.
yeah. Oh, me too. That one guy.
Yeah, one guy.
That one guy.
We got one.
But even though his character kind of sucked, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely did. That's like, dude, you had to know that he was lying to you, but come on now,
I
you
didn't
were
trust.
literally the
Yeah, I was like,
betrayer.
I did not trust those pills. It just felt weird. I was like,
Yeah.
why? Yeah. Anyway, I do have. I could talk a little bit more about this, but I think, they're just little tidbits here and there. So I think we're good for now.
Okay.
If you want to hear us talk more about our show or about these movies, we do talk a little bit more afterwards, after these recordings. So join us on our Twitch.
Yep, it's twitch.tv/C3 Films. And yeah, what did you guys think about Dune? That's how we felt about it. Did you also think that it was kind of slow? Did you think that it was the space epic that you were hoping for? For those of you that have read the books or seen the original movies, how does this compare? Is it better than that original 1984 movie? Is it kind of more in line with the books than that first movie was? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And when you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.